related to professional employee organizations. And if we could go ahead and get a review on what the bill does from the reviser. Reviser Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2790 does, as the chairman indicated, it pertains to professional employer organizations and their oversight with respect to registration. Currently, that's with the Commissioner of Insurance. This bill changes it to the Secretary of State. The bill does three things, and that was the first one. The registration requirement, regulatory oversight would be under the Secretary of State. The second thing the bill does is specifically refers to the use of assurance organizations for compliance by professional employer organizations. So to maintain their compliance with the Secretary of State's registration requirements, they would be able to use an assurance organization. And that's changed from current law, which just refers to an entity that is approved by the Commissioner of Insurance. The third thing the bill does is it specifically states that welfare benefit plans offered by professional employer organizations are to be treated as single employer welfare benefit plans under state law. I would like to point out just one minor item. If you look at the title, there's a reference to Secretary of Labor in line 4. That is a typo. Should be Secretary of State. And I'd ask leave from the committee to fix that if this bill would be passed out.
Okay, committee, any questions for the reviser? Okay, seeing none. Thanks. First up as a proponent, Eric Turek, Director of Government and Public Affairs, Kansas Department of Insurance. Welcome to Commerce Committee, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Eric Turek with the Kansas Insurance Department, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide proponent testimony on House Bill 2790. Since 2012, the Kansas Insurance Department has been responsible for the registration of PEOs. And for those who don't know, PEOs are businesses that basically perform human resources functions. They manage benefits, payroll, training for employees, et cetera. And we've been in contact and in communication with the National Association of Professional Employers. National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, or NAPIO. And I believe that you'll hear from them here as well. We've been working with them since 2022 to find a more appropriate agency for the oversight of PEOs. You know, the Kansas Insurance Department, our main function is to regulate the insurance and securities industries. We do believe that the Secretary of State's office, they are already registering businesses in Kansas. This is they're a more fitting agency to take this on. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to answer questions.
Committee, any questions for the Department of Insurance? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Next up, Clay Barker, Deputy Secretary of State, Secretary of State Office. Welcome back to Commerce Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Clay Barker, General Counsel, Kansas Secretary of State. We support this bill. We have no problem with moving the filing from the Insurance Commissioner over to the Secretary of State. Back in 2012, when this bill was this statute was originally enacted, it probably should have gone to us. I understand there were some personalities involved. And our office, to the surprise of many in the public, does other things besides elections. 250,000 business entities, hundreds of thousands of UCC filings, all the way down to bonded warehouses, interlocal agreements, and river easements for the state's filing cabinet. So we support the bill, and there's a minor piece we may bring up tomorrow if the bill's worked that we're talking to the Insurance Commissioner about. And with that, I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, any questions for Deputy Secretary? All right, seeing none, thanks. Next up, Erica Brune, CEO for Level 1 PEO. Welcome to Commerce Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I'm here in support of House Bill 2790 and ask for your support on the bill. My name is Erica Brune, and I am the CEO of Lever One, which is a PEO headquartered in Overland Park, Kansas. I serve as the Leadership Council Chair for the Heartlands region for the National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, or NAPIO. By way of background, PEOs provide human resource services to small and mid-sized businesses, paying wages and taxes under the PEO's EIN, offering workers' compensation and risk management services, and providing compliance assistance with employment-related rules and regulations. PEOs have been operating and sponsoring single employer health plans for decades, pre and post ACA in Kansas. They provide worksite employees of small and mid-sized businesses with access to Fortune 500 level benefits they would otherwise not have access to. The bill before you today updates the Kansas PEO Act to codify our existing practices that authorize PEOs to sponsor fully insured benefits as a single employer. This is consistent with the approach taken by other states that have clarified within their respective PEO statutes that a PEO is deemed an employer for purposes of sponsoring welfare benefit plans for its covered employees, and that such plans are treated for purposes of state law as a single employer welfare benefit plan. The modest legislation would simply restate and codify our practice that has been in place in Kansas for years, as well as provide parity with other states that have enacted statutory frameworks regulating PEOs. Similar statutes can be found in Colorado, Missouri, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today in support of House Bill 2790.
Okay, committee, any questions for Erica? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up, Bill Manis. You'll have to correct me when you get up there. President and CEO of Syndio. You'll have to correct me there too.
Thank you. You did good the first time. Bill Manus is the name. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here as well in support of House Bill 2790 and ask for your support on the bill. My name is Bill Manus, and I'm the president and CEO of Syndio Outsourcing, headquartered in Wichita, Kansas, a PEO based there. I serve as the secretary treasurer for the National Association of Professional Employer Organizations, or NAPIO, and I also serve as the chairman of ESAC, which is the Employer Services Assurance Corporation, which is an independent assurance organization. It is important that if this transition is to occur, the Kansas Secretary of State has the authority to engage ESAC as a vendor, and this bill accomplishes that purpose. ESAC has been working with the Department of Insurance since the passage of the PEO Act a decade ago to provide financial assurance and accreditation services for PEOs operating in Kansas. By the way, there are only 3 PEOs that are based in Kansas. 2 of those 3 are represented here, and both of us are ESAC accredited. NAPIO and ESAC support the legislation before you and ask for your support as well. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today in support of House Bill 2790. To answer any questions you might have.
Committee, any questions? Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question may be for you, maybe for anybody that can answer it. This is sounds like an insurance issue, and I'm completely unfamiliar with a lot of insurance issues. So can you help me understand who is the customer of a PEO? And what's the advantage to going from the insurance department to the Secretary of State's office?
2 different issues. One is registration, which the PEO Act of 2012 in the state of Kansas requires registration for all PEOs doing business in the state of Kansas. Right now, that is enacted through the Department of Insurance. We want to move that to the Secretary of State because it's really just a registration act. The insurance department doesn't really oversee anything. It just acts as the place where we register. The second issue, which is who would use a PEO, we cater to small businesses. We work with small businesses to take on the responsibilities that they have as an employer: payroll, benefits, workers' compensation, compliance, everything they have to do as an employer, we do on their behalf. It's almost like we act like the HR department for the small business. So all of our business clients are small businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not showing any other in-person proponents. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the bill? Seeing none. I'm also seeing no opponents or no neutrals. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak as an opponent or neutral? Seeing none. We do have written testimony from NAPIO that Bill just referenced, the National Association of Professional Employment Organization. That'll be in the S drive. With that, I'll close the hearing on HB 2790. Okay, next up, hearing on HB 2745. Licensing for military spouses. We're going to update them from the revisor and what the bill does. Revisor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 2745, it does involve occupational licensing, and the bill really does one thing, and that is it exempts military spouses of military service members, active duty military service members, from all application licensing, registration, certification, or permit fees. So it exempts military spouses from those fees. And that's what the bill does. There is a fiscal note attached to this bill, and it's fairly lengthy. It goes through all the various licensing bodies, indicating what they think this bill would result as far as a fiscal impact on them. So just to point out that is there for the review of the committee.
Okay, any questions for the revisor? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charles, didn't we do this last year? Or did this get stuck somewhere in the process and not go into effect?
Representative, I don't recall a bill specifically dealing with exempting military spouses. So, that the issue of making it easier for applications from military service members in Kansas, that's been around for a few years. And, the background, the bill here, the statute that this bill modifies, of course, that was an effort to make that much easier for those military service persons, as well as other people who want to become Kansas residents. But specifically with respect to application fees, I don't recall anything.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Okay, we have proponent in person, Jason Watkins, the Wichita Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Watkins here for the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'll be quick. We have some folks from Wichita here that will testify to this bill as well. But first, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding a hearing on what we think is a very important piece of legislation. Chamber introduced this legislation at the request of the Wichita Chamber's Military Affairs Council. And the revisor did a great job explaining what the bill does. It's very simple. It exempts spouses of full-time military in Kansas from application, licensure fees, et cetera. I think there's two primary reasons for this policy. The first one is you see a member of the military in uniform and you'll often thank them for their service. They sacrifice greatly for our country. The spouses don't wear uniforms, so it's less common that you thank them for their service and their sacrifice, but make no mistake, they are in service and they are sacrificing as well. This will make a difference for them and for their families. We reach different points in life where different amounts of money mean different things to us. There are a lot of people that a few $100s in terms of an application or a licensure fee wouldn't really make much difference to their bottom line. In the case of a lot of our military families, especially enlisted families, a few $100s can be a difference maker in buying something for their children, school clothes, school supplies, and that can delay them from entering the workforce. So this isn't just a benefit for the military spouses and their families. It's also a benefit for our Kansas employers who are before this committee, I think, a lot, telling you they're in desperate need of talent. The second reason that we think this is a great bill, the military, the Department of Defense pays attention to state level policy when it comes to how states deal with the military, the spouses of members of the military. And this, again, would be a great benefit for those families, but it also makes a statement to the Department of Defense that Kansas appreciates the United States military and that Kansas appreciates having military installations in our state, and that we recognize not just the great value in terms of what they do to protect our freedom and to protect democracy, but these are also major economic drivers in the communities where these bases are. So it's not a complicated bill. We think it makes a lot of sense. We hope you'll work the bill, and we hope everybody on the committee will vote to pass it out favorably. And I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Watkins? Representative Dodson.
Yeah, just a comment. Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, a couple of years ago, we did 2066, which essentially made it easier for military spouses to get licensure when they came into the state of Kansas. If you can imagine coming in for a 2-year tour, which is about 90% of every military member, and then having to wait several months in order to get a license for your profession, that just doesn't work very well. So I think this is very attractive, and I just consider it a follow-on, because after all, they're going to be here 2 years. So they've already paid for that license somewhere in order to come here to Kansas. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, next up is Tamara Ray. On behalf of Home Base Wichita.
Good afternoon, Chairman and House Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on House Bill 2745. My name is Tamara Ray, and I am the Director of Military Employment Strategy for the Workforce Alliance of South Central Kansas. I lead Home Base Wichita, a strategic initiative to unite military-connected individuals deliberately and intentionally to jobs and careers in the Wichita region. Military-connected individuals are transitioning service members, veterans, National Guard members, reservists, and military spouses. The partners of Home Base Wichita include the Wichita Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Wichita Partnership, the Greater Wichita Veterans Advocacy Board, and the project is also receiving funds from the City of Wichita. Based on my experience as a veteran, military spouse, and now in my current role, improving access to professional licenses and certifications for military spouses will both support military families, but also the Kansas economy. During my 22 years of active duty service, I witnessed many airmen and their families go to new units and experience financial insecurity due to the lack of employment opportunities for their spouses. This can have profound impacts on families who rely on dual incomes to survive. According to 2021 Blue Star report, more than 2/3 of active duty family respondents agreed that having two incomes was vitally important to their family's well-being, and yet spouses' employment challenges are named as a perennial top of issues for active duty families. Despite resources, counseling, and employment assistance, there were still barriers to employment. A major barrier was spouses not having a particular license or certification in their career field. The process to obtain one is often lengthy and cumbersome, which forces many to just not complete that process at all. This results in a domino effect, causing financial stress, overdue bills, possible impact to their credit, and often culminates in divorce. As an active duty leader, I can attest that at each of my 4 active duty locations, these issues took a forefront, impacting the military's ability to carry out its mission and the airmen's mission combat readiness. Many professions, including healthcare, legal, childcare, cosmetology, just to name a few, require certification or licensure in the state that they obtain them in. Military members have cited shame, embarrassment, and lack of knowledge of resources and a desire to avoid debt as barriers to seeking assistance. Many members fear potential impacts to their career for lack of financial readiness. Those who cannot maintain financial readiness are separated from the military, which affects their family, the military unit, and the Air Force as a whole. Now, as a military spouse and member of the community, supporting other veterans and spouses, I see how not having an occupational license impacts Kansas. Many of the spouses and veterans I assist through Home Base Wichita have experienced in the trade but lack the certification required, eliminating them from high-quality available jobs. I get requests daily for certification and registration requests. Just the jobs are there, the employers are there, and the employees are there. The only thing that is missing is a certificate or license to match them. Too many cannot afford to pay for this training and are left without recognition of their trade. This leads to transitioning service members and their families leaving our city and state to seek employment elsewhere. The primary goal of Home Base Wichita is to be intentional and deliberate in making Kansas friendly for veterans and military families to put down roots. Improving pathways to licensure, certifications, and professional credentials to help military spouses enter the workforce will support the goals of Home Base Wichita. Thank you for attention and allowing me to testify. I'm happy to stand for questions when appropriate.
Committee, any questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Senior Master Sergeant.
Thank you so much.
Next up, Colonel John Buckley, Greater Wichita Area Veterans Advocacy Board.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for letting me speak today. I was a senior leader in the United States Army for 30 years. When I began my career, I was told that if the Army wanted you to have a wife, they would issue you one. But then I got married, and I quickly learned that, in fact, our military spouses are critical to the readiness of our armed forces. Moreover, I also learned that if my spouse was not happy, nobody in the family was happy. My wife was a teacher. My wife was unable to continue her teaching career because she was unable to transfer that certificate from one state to the other. When I retired from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, after 30 years of active duty service. I am a minority in that very few active duty military people who transitioned into the civilian career stay in Kansas. I'm not native to Kansas. That makes me even a greater minority. In my career, after leaving the military, I've started for 2 major employers here in the state of Kansas a recruiting initiative focusing on military members, military community members. I've done it for over 10 or 11 years. I should say 10 years with Koch Industries and now with Textron Aviation. And the challenge that I see when I try to recruit our transitioning service members to remain in the state of Kansas is that their military spouse has not been employed while they were here, and their inclination is to go home, wherever home might be. I see that military members create dream sheets as they move about in their career. They get to choose, or at least they recommend to their personnel leaders where they want to stay or where they want to go or where they want to do a change in station. If we change this, if we make this law and turn this law into effect, our military spouses will have an influence and say, on your dream sheet, put one of these 3 military installations in Kansas. It will encourage them to stay. And then more importantly, as our military members transition from their active duty military service, they will wish to remain where their military spouse is currently employed. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I stand here for any questions that you may have.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up is Chairman Ryan Beatty on behalf of Sedgwick County Board of Commissioners. AKA Jason Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Watkins on behalf of Sedgwick County. He was written only.
All right, we'll move the testimony to written only. I'm seeing no more in-person proponents. Is there anyone else here that wishes to attest to the bill as a proponent? Seeing none. I'm not seeing any opponents. Are there any opponents in the House that wish to speak? Seeing none. Neutral in person, Larry Carnes, Kansas State Board of Technical Professionals. Welcome to committee, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Larry Carnes. I'm the Executive Director of the Board of Technical Professions. We license engineers, architects, geologists, land surveyors, and other professionals. About 2/3 of our licensees, and we have about 17,000 individuals that we license in the state of Kansas, do not reside in the state of Kansas. They reside all over the country, and they practice here by reciprocity. When we were here on House Bill 2066 2 years ago, we were making it an easier pathway for military service members and their spouses who are here in Kansas to get licensed in Kansas. No problems with that. The concern I have with this bill, and this is neutral testimony, obviously I've got a little bit of conflict of interest. I'm a fee-funded agency. You're wanting to cut my fees. I don't mind if you cut my fees for the military service people who are here in Kansas, but the way this bill is written, if I read it correctly, the definition of an applicant is any military spouse or military service member, military spouse that's married to an active military service member anywhere wouldn't pay any fees in Kansas. So if I had an active military family in Florida and the spouse wanted to get a reciprocal license in Kansas, she and her husband continue to live in Florida, this bill would require that we not charge them a fee for practicing in Kansas. What happens is an architectural firm or an engineering firm that they may work for may get a project in Kansas. None of the people in that firm necessarily come to Kansas to work. They work on designing the plans for that building that's going to be constructed in Kansas. As I remember House Bill 2066, it was an economic encouragement bill to get people to come and live in Kansas. And this goes beyond that. So if the intent is to benefit people who are stationed in Kansas, great. If it spreads beyond that, I just wonder, is that the intent of the committee? I'd be happy to stand for questions. I will cite to you the particular section that I'm looking at is the definition of applicant. And the definition of applicant, and I think it's in House Bill 2066, and I don't recall the exact statute that that's been transferred to. It's a definition of an applicant is an individual who's a military spouse, military service member, or an individual who has established or intends to establish residency in the state of Kansas. It doesn't require the military service member or the military spouse to establish residency in Kansas. I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? All right, so what percentage of your fees are generated from military spouses outside of the state?
I I have absolutely no idea. I don't have that data, and I don't collect that data. So I really can't tell you what the effect would be. What I know is it would have more effect if it covers people out of state than it does if it covers people that are just in state, obviously.
Okay. All right. Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure is your hang up is what the word or. Do you feel that that is broadly applies the change in this statute and doesn't just limit it to military families?
When 2066 was passed, they added the or people who were moving to Kansas or intended to move to Kansas. That expanded it to anyone as opposed to just military service people. It's not the word or that I'm concerned with. It's that there's no connection to the state of Kansas. I would say that you'd say while they're stationed in Kansas, something to connect them to the state.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Good point.
Quite welcome. If you have other questions, you know where to find me.
Right. All right, next up is Alexandra Blasey, Kansas State Board of Pharmacy, neutral testimony in person.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of committee, I'm Alexandra Blasey, Executive Director for the Kansas State Board of Pharmacy. I appreciate the opportunity to provide this neutral testimony today on House Bill 2745. The board does strongly support minimizing barriers to registration and licensure for active duty military veterans and military spouses. We've worked hard over the last few years to comply with House Bill 2066 in the statute. And to your question, Mr. Chairman, that our military spouses and active duty military applications were just about 20 average or so last year for each group of individuals fiscal year. We did have some questions, and while I understand it's not customary for the conferee to be asking the questions of the committee, we did just want to raise them because we were uncertain based on the language of the bill if these things would be impacted. First, and specifically in new subsection U, that's what I've been looking at. There's language that indicates that military spouses should be exempt from all fees by any licensing body, including application, licensing, registration, certification, or permit fees. And so our first question is, does that language for exemption of fees for military spouses include both an individual registration or license, like a pharmacist, or does that also now expand in that all fees definition to facility licenses as well? So we issue registrations for pharmacies in the state of Kansas. If a military spouse were to own and operate a pharmacy, would that fee also be exempt under the language of this bill? The second question is, does this language require exemption of fees for renewal applications or only original initial applications? Obviously, the fiscal impact to our agency would be very, very low, if any at all. Certainly negligible if it were just initial applications. But if that builds to include renewal applications, that could involve additional staff resources to update things and require additional scrutiny at the time of the renewal application. Our third question is the agency still allowed to charge the KBI background check fee? So the language in subsection U says all fees. Part of the fee that we charge to an applicant is a $47 fee currently established by the KBI, which is a direct pass-through. We do not receive any revenue from that cost. We are required to pay that to the KBI to conduct the background check, which is required under our licensure requirements. And that's a one-time fee. That's not every year or anything like that, but it's a one-time fee. And we are told by KBI that will increase to $57 July 1st of this year. So if there could be some consideration from this committee about how that KBI fee would be handled, that would be very helpful. And lastly, we just want to make sure that we interpret this correctly, that this bill should not apply to active duty military, but only their spouses. That seemed odd to us, but we're certainly happy to move forward with the bill in whatever measure the committee deems appropriate to pass through. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Okay, we'll have the revisers work on this overnight, and when we work the bill, we'll have those answers for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any more neutral in person. Is there anyone else wishes to testify neutral, or is there anyone wishes to testify as an opponent? Not showing any opponents. Seeing none. Okay, committee, you have 2 written proponent testimonies in the S file. One from Jonathan McRoy and one from Eric Stafford, Kansas Chamber. With that, we'll close the hearing on HB 2745 and open the hearing on HB 2664, and we'll get a overview from the reviser. Reviser Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2664 provides for a program under the K-State 105 a program that's part of the K-State University Extension, I believe. And this program is specifically to fund a child care service provider who would provide assistance to specifically home-based child care providers. So if you look at the first page of the bill, you'll see there's an appropriation there of $10 million. That's to an established account already with K-State, and that's for the purpose of funding this program. That would be for fiscal year 2025. If you look at the rest of the page, we start talking about the program. Basically, the idea here is that we're going to award funding to an entity that would provide this assistance and support to home-based child care providers. And to be eligible for the funding from the KSU 105 project, the child care service provider would have to not be a state entity, provide similar services in 3 states. So this would not be, this would be, an entity that has some experience of some size. And then the entity would need to partner with KSU 105 project to plan, staff, and execute recruitment events for home-based child care providers, execute a 2-year mentorship program for new home-based child care providers, provide a software platform, and offer home-based child care providers coaching and training. And then there are provisions in the bill for with respect to an agreement. This child care service provider would need to enter into an agreement with K-State. Some reporting requirements to the K-State 105 project. You can see that in the middle of page 2, the number of home-based child care providers enrolled in the funding recipients program, number of child care spots created, number of home-based child care providers on the wait list, and potential long-term economic impact of the awarded funds. There's a provision there in the middle of page 2 for what happens if funds are misused. Lines 23 through 27. The project is to be subject to procurement and bidding processes, and recipients of funding are to respond to requests for information from the legislature or state agencies. Then there are some definitions. Home-based child care providers defined at the bottom of page 2. An individual has control or custody of 1 or more children under 16 years of age, unattended by parent or guardian. It does not include individuals who provide such care to children in the custody of the Secretary for Children and Families who are placed with a prospective adoptive family or who are related to the person by blood, marriage, or legal adoption. So that is what this bill does, and stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charles, so this money flows through K-State 105, is that right?
Yes.
And then they award it, and they use procurement procedures to award the money. And are they bound by the state, by our bidding process and letting process, or are they bound by a different set of bidding processes?
So the bill provides there on page 2, lines 28, 29, KSU 105 project shall be subject to procurement and bidding processes in Kansas law. So I guess that would be the standard bidding processes. Does that answer your question?
Well, it clarifies that they're bound by a bidding process. I just don't know which one. And I don't know if we may need some research on this. I don't know if K-State, I don't know if a Regents institution and a sub-project of a Regent institution has a different set of procurement rules than the state of Kansas would have. I don't know, is it held to the same standard we hold agencies in the Department of Administration to? That would be my question.
Yes, so I understand, and I would need to look that up specifically, but I guess the broad answer is they would, the law that would be applicable to K-State would apply to this.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
Representative Williams and then Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going back to the $15 million that's appropriated on line 15, is that a new 15 million or is it the 5 million we appropriated 1 year last year for the Kansas State 105 program?
So I'm not familiar with that other appropriation. If you look at this language, there's 15 million for the cooperative extension service. And then of that 15 million, 10 million to administer the program.
So it's a new line item, not appropriated elsewhere. And we are then assuming because this is for 2 years, this program looks like it's in effect for 2 years, that there's just an additional 5 million, but there's nothing in the bill that attributes what that would be used for.
So in this bill, the appropriation is just for one fiscal year, for a fiscal year ending 2025.
It's appropriated for one fiscal year, but it's there to execute it over a 2-year mentorship program. So they receive the money, the $15 million, an entity through some bid process is selected, and they receive the bid award for 10 million. What happens per this bill with the additional 5? Are we just establishing a fund and making the assumption that that additional 5 is a carryover?
So with respect to an additional appropriation, I'd have to check with our appropriations revisers about that. And you said that was passed?
Well, we did it in here, didn't we, Mr. Chairman? The 105?
That was in appropriations.
Okay. Well, I guess then just limiting to what we know right here from this bill, I understand what the 10 million is for, 100%. I don't see where the bill specifies the additional 5 million, other than it's just establishing a fund.
There's nothing in here about an additional 5 million.
Well, it starts with 15 million.
Right. But I mean, I guess if you just look at this bill, I'm not sure what that additional 5 would be about, other than it's, cooperative extension service, including official hospitality.
So, okay, so just to be sure that we have a bill with $15 million and we're not sure what the $5 million is for, or maybe someone else will be able to explain it. Thank you.
Representative, this bill was was moved to our committee. And so we didn't really have a whole lot to do with it. There are some, I should have stated up front, there are some issues with the bill as far as money wise and even department wise. So it may not even go through K-State 105. Representative Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question's actually for research. 2 questions. One, and I'm still interested, even though based off your last comment about K-State 105, they came and presented to our interim committee this summer about that they already are spending money childcare wise. So I'm curious how much money of their 5 million that they were appropriated, how much they're spending in childcare. And the second question I have is, could the committee all get a list of all childcare funds that are being appropriated already in the state budget? And if we could get it pre-COVID, because I'd like to know what of those childcare funds are ARPA dollars and when do they expire? I think that's going to be very telling that the committee should know how much money we're spending as a state on childcare already. Thank you.
You good? Okay. Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Charles, this is an appropriation to one child care service provider, correct? Based on line 22, section 2?
It's not one it's not one child care provider. It's one software provider.
Okay, but it's one, right?
Yes.
It says A, okay. And then line 30 specifies.
Yeah, and if I could just respond, because sometimes the language is providers and sometimes it's provider, but in the first page, line 20, I think maybe that was the line you referenced, line 23, it does use a singular there.
Okay, all right. And then line 30 specifies that it not be a state entity, so it can be a for-profit provider, further narrowed by the requirement that they provide similar services in 3 states. Correct? Okay, thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for staff, not necessarily for you, Charles. So thank you for standing there because this doesn't necessarily pertain to you. This is actually a question about a proviso in the social services budget, which I can't seem to find online, but maybe you can get with us either now or let us know. I know that there was a $500,000 appropriation that was made, but I don't know if it was made to K-State 105 or if it was made directly to Wonder School. I'm no longer on that committee, but I can't find the budget proviso or anything online. And so I would like to have that information, and I'd like the committee to have that information as well, please. Thank you.
Representative Carpenter. So before you speak, that has not been read into appropriations, and so it hasn't really come to fruition yet, but I'll let Representative Carpenter speak to what's going on in his committee.
It's not my committee.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you,
Chairman Mason.
We did have a similar proposal in social services budget. A substitute motion was made to lower the amount to $500,000 to do more or less a pilot, but it was this Wonder Child group that was promoting it. The money would be paid through the agency to the Wonder Child organization.
Any more questions for the reviser?
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Mason.
Yes, thank you. It would not be paid to KSU 105. It would be to one of the state agencies, and I'm foggy on whether it was KDADS or KDHE at this point.
Any further questions for the reviser? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Charles. Okay, moving on to proponents in person, Colton Gibson with Wonder School.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm pleased to be here today, and I actually hope to help you understand this proposal a little bit better. Chairman Tarwater mentioned it came from another committee, and there are some flaws in the bill, kind of as written. I will kind of just start out and point out and say that my testimony today is largely reflective of Representative Tim Johnson's, which he gave before the Social Services Budget Committee 2 weeks ago. While we debate the contents of this statewide approach, which is what's in the bill today, there was a proviso passed out of the Social Services Budget Committee to begin that pilot program for $500,000, and that was in the DCF budget. I will also clarify, Wonder School is not written into that in any which way. The language that was in there is actually exactly reflective of this bill and my testimony today. Since March of last year, we've had incredible meetings with childcare leaders in the administration and in the legislature regarding family-based childcare and why the state needs to put more of an importance on that, or a priority on that. It was made clear to us that between existing state and federal programs, there is zero earmarked funding for services similar to the direct recruitment, training, and retention of family-based childcare providers in the state of Kansas. We're not talking about community outreach visits to a local chamber of commerce. That's easy. You can have someone show up to your chamber, promote to the community, come in, learn how to get licensed as a daycare provider. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about hands-on experts going directly into communities of need that have already been identified, actually, by KU's program and KDHE, to recruit and train willing and qualified professionals, often teachers, and often based on cultural or linguistic needs as well. And we are here today to advocate for this program to be rolled out statewide. You'll hear today that other states are doing this, and Kansas is falling behind. With respect to transparency, I do want everyone to know that much of this debate has been focused on which agency should issue the RFP and provide oversight for the third-party vendor administering the program. Our official position, just for awareness, is that it's not up to us. It's up to the legislature and at the discretion of the legislature. We believe the KSU 105 program, because of their presence in all 105 counties, definitely has some perks to it and benefits. But we also believe KDHE or DCF would also work well. We do have confidence that the merits of this approach can be overseen by any qualified administrative body. So kind of jumping back here about family-based childcare, most people just think of childcare as happening in a facility. But the reality of it is 97% of all childcare actually takes place at home. As the demands for childcare become more numerous and the industry more highly regulated and complex, we've actually seen a 25% drop in recent years in family-based childcare, primarily because of COVID. Meeting the demand in a state as vast and diverse as Kansas does require a greater mix of both center-based and family-based providers. We're not up here to advocate for you to stop investing in daycares and center-based care. We're just up here to say that this could be another tool in the state's chest to go after childcare deserts. Family-based childcare is often best able to accommodate families in rural areas, families with unconventional working hours like shift workers and first responders, and those with particular cultural and or linguistic needs. Family-based providers are true American entrepreneurs. They run their own small businesses themselves, but they also face incredible issues in the licensing and regulation fields. I'll let Chris Bennett, who's the CEO of Wonder School, who's going to provide testimony next, talk about the results from other states. But I do just want to point out that in year 2 alone, Nevada created nearly 2,500 childcare slots through a family-based childcare incubator. It's more than we've created so far in Kansas. In Michigan, the program saw such significant success that they have expanded it twice over. And right next door in Missouri, they've just contracted to stand up 100 new family childcare providers and provide business coaching to support 300 existing providers. Over the last couple of years, we've heard over and over about the need from anywhere between 50-some thousand childcare seats to 85,000 childcare seats, and that's per Childcare Aware of Kansas on their website. With the need so great, an innovative approach is required. From last year to last week, Kansas has distributed around $98 million, that's mostly federal funds, to create nearly 6,460 childcare slots. All of that is in center-based care and directed to only 73 communities across the state. This funding was strictly intended for the construction of community centers that provide a series of services, including childcare, community matches, planning, and construction all required before any of those projects are actualized. And we have kids being watched. Over the interim, the administration and many legislators heard proposals for investment in the recruitment and retention of new family-based childcare providers via a family-based childcare incubator. The results were clear concerning the state's return on investment. A $10 million appropriation over 3 years would result in at least 375 new family-based childcare providers for a total of anywhere between 3,750 to 4,500 childcare seats. This figure also includes 2 years of support and technology for each new provider, such as marketing, enrollment, family communication, billing, and expense reporting. We're advocating today for the appropriation of $10 million to a qualified administrative body of the legislature's choosing to issue an RFP and award the funding to a non-state partner for the recruitment and retention of family-based childcare providers. The language that we've used is based on language that was passed out of Michigan Appropriations Bill number 4437 that was introduced by Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. The bill is a bit confusing as written. It mentions grants several times. I just want to clarify that that's not exactly what we're trying to do here. If you look at the third page of my testimony, you'll see the proviso that was passed out of the Social Services Budget Committee, with the exception of the $10 million figure instead of $500,000 and K-State 105 instead of DCF. But that is the exact proviso that was passed out of that committee. As I wrap up, I hope to leave you with the knowledge that the state can and should be doing more for childcare. I hope that you will consider our proposal as you develop a meaningful childcare approach. Thank you, and Mr. Chair, I stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions for Cole? Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to make sure I understand. You don't actually, you don't have anything to do with childcare. You're just like trying to get state money to basically be an intermediary to at-home daycare centers.
That's incorrect. Are you referring to me personally or Wonder School?
Wonder School. You're representing Wonder School, yes?
Correct.
You
representative of Wonder School.
Yes. Okay. So Wonder School is an intermediary. Is that correct? They're a middleman.
That's correct.
And they would take state resources and they would market and do payroll or whatever for, you're saying that it would increase capacity, but you're just an intermediary. You're just in between people who need care and people who are providing care, and making the argument that you would increase capacity that way.
I'll let Chris Bennett, who provides testimony next. He's the CEO of Wonder School, where they've been doing this in other states. Yes, as an intermediary, but kind of to kick back against that just a little bit, what they do is they go directly into childcare deserts where there is a need, and they find willing and capable and qualified individuals. Then they train them and help them through the licensing and regulatory process of standing up and beginning that childcare business on their own. From there, then they provide that one-on-one business coaching and support. They help them with technology to connect them with potential parents and children needing care, whether that's enrollment, billing, just communication back and forth. And then they provide as that go in between with their technology.
So it's a technology-based platform that connects parents and at-home daycare providers.
Yes, and then there's the whole software as a service, which their service is they do what nobody else does, where they actually go in, they find individuals who are qualified and capable, and they encourage them and help them start their own businesses.
State funding provides 2 years. What happens after that?
The way that if you look at the fourth page of the testimony by Chris Bennett for Wonder School, you'll see the exact proposal that's been proposed to the administration and legislative branches. That's for the $10 million figure. That would actually cover for 3 years, 125 new providers stood up each year for 3 years, and then 2 years of technology support for each provider that is stood up.
I mean, I can wait until further testimony, but the central point is at some point state money runs out or we have to keep providing it. And I'm curious what happens at that point. What's your business model?
Yes. So page 4,
after taxpayer money
they will
runs
take
out.
They will charge, let's say, $23,000 for each provider that they stand up.
$23,000 for each provider.
Yeah. And then that includes then 2 years of service, all the one-on-one business coaching and everything in between.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I love this idea of having more children be home in a home environment rather than an institution environment. How is it that Wonder School is able to provide services, childcare services for children at a minimal cost compared to what Kansas did? I believe in your testimony, you stated that we spent $98 million in the past year, and we only added 6,460 slots. That's over $15,000 per child. And using your lowest numbers estimated for Wonder School, if you even just had 3,750, which is your low amount that is projected out of 10 million, that's $2,600 per spot. So my question is, how are you able to provide these services at a fraction of the cost, about 5 times less the cost?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Williams, if you don't mind, I'm actually going to let Chris Spinnett, the CEO of Wonder School, speak to that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Representative Clayton, I apologize. I skipped over you earlier. Did you have something else? Okay. Thought I heard you over there rumbling. Okay. Representative Blue.
Thank you. Colton, I have a couple questions. My first one is, I'm asking this because one, it's written in your testimony, and two, was brought up earlier about the 500,000. So we know how much 10 million will bring in slot wise. Do you guys know how much 500,000 will bring in slot wise?
500,000 would be around 20 providers.
Okay.
20
And then, and this may be a question for the CEO. Is there a reasoning behind line 31 on page 1 where it says must be in at least 3 states?
Yes, I believe that's just to make sure that whoever the qualified vendor is actually has the experience in working on something statewide and standing up and working with different regulations between different entities.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Osman, and then Pascal. Hold on before you speak. If there is anyone here looking for us to because we might work a bill later, we will not be working any bills today, so I can save you some time. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out. Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Representative Blue took my question, so thank you.
Representative Paskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, can you guesstimate approximately how many entities can meet the requirement of not being a state entity providing similar services in 3 states that could potentially get this funding?
I'm not aware of any other services that provide something similar to this.
Oh, okay.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up is Chris Bennett, CEO and founder of Wonder School.
Hello, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wonder School. Started Wonder School in 2016. And I created Wonder School because I went to a home-based childcare program where I grew up in Miami. And the woman who started the childcare program, her name was Yoli, and the program was incredible. Had a great experience in the program. And she eventually ended up growing it into a center that she still runs today. After going to her program, I worked in my parents' business and I got to see her success, decided to become an entrepreneur, went to Wharton and studied business and have been an entrepreneur since. When I moved to the Bay Area, I started to notice that there was a big shortage of childcare. And I kept hearing from parents that they couldn't find childcare. And I kept asking, why don't you go to home-based childcare programs or family-based childcare programs? Because I had such a great experience in the program. And what I kept hearing is that they would go into the programs and oftentimes the providers didn't know their prices. They weren't giving an appropriate tour. It wasn't very professional. So what I ended up doing is working with a childcare provider, helping them market their business, helping them run a better business essentially, and really turn their business around, help them stay around. After seeing that, I decided we actually needed more childcare. So I started 2 childcare programs myself, partnered with individuals who were teachers and went through the entire process of getting it licensed, learning how to operate a high quality program, understanding all of the business operations of a childcare program, and had a great experience doing that. And decided to start this company, Wonder School, where we started childcare programs all across California, New York, and then started them all across the United States. In 2020, we started to get a lot of interest from state and local governments to support the creation and support existing childcare programs with business operations, and decided to change the focus of our business. And today we work with 8 states where we create childcare programs, support the business operations of childcare programs, and we also provide a multitude of other services, including a childcare finder that's really easy for parents to find childcare, a substitute teacher platform for substitutes to get involved in childcare programs. One of the key things we realized is that to ensure that there's enough childcare, we really need to support childcare providers with operating great businesses. So we help them with their pricing, we help them with advertising, we help them with their social media, we help them with get all of the enrollments they need. We manage their billing for them. And we're constantly thinking about how do we keep them full and how do we make sure that they're earning enough to stay in business. And then along with that, what other services can we provide to make sure that they're getting the appropriate support that we need? And this has led to great partnerships. We have a partnership in Michigan, in Missouri, and Mississippi, and all of them we're going in and creating home-based childcare programs and working directly with state agencies, state nonprofits to make sure that there's enough childcare. So there is a budget that you all see. You were asking questions about it before. It's on page 4, and what we're proposing is the creation of 375 programs over a 3-year period, and providing ongoing support for those programs. Support for those programs for 2 years. And then what we do is we provide real-time data back to individuals working with the childcare program. So any agency or administrator, anyone who's working with those childcare programs, you'll be able to see the enrollment of those programs, how much those childcare providers are earning, and you can use that data to then go in and provide additional support to childcare providers to make sure that they're able to stay up and running. And yeah, that's the overview. So I stand for any questions you have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. I too am a product of home-based childcare, and I think we both turned out fairly normal anyway. So there might be some pushback from the committee on that. But so one of the questions I have is, currently in Kansas, we have a very strict restrictions on who's like at home-based daycare, how many kids you can have, and I think it's 20 hours total. So if you had 2 kids, you could watch them each for 10 hours during the week. That is obviously going to have to change once you train home-based operators how to be daycare centers or watch more kids, right?
Yes.
That's not a business model. You can't watch somebody you can't only allocate 20 hours total.
Yeah, as you mentioned, for a childcare program to be sustainable, and for the provider to earn enough to actually want to enter the sector and stay in the sector, you typically need to operate a full day to both attract parents and also to attract tuition that'll allow you to stay in business. And one thing we find when we start working with states is a lot of the issues that the childcare providers are facing that are actually limiting the supply of childcare become very, very apparent. And then we hope to work with any state that we go into to make those challenges seen, and see if there's ways to support childcare providers in getting to a point where they can operate and stay in business to make sure that we have enough childcare for the families in our communities.
Okay, committee, any questions? Representative Blue.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. I'm really passionate about childcare. I have a couple questions. From the states that you work in, do you feel like there's a state that is maybe a great model that Kansas could look to for childcare, or that they have relaxed rules and regulations or anything like that?
So what we do is we've actually built a list of rules and regulations that we would recommend to any state we go into to make sure that it's a favorable environment for a childcare provider to be able to operate their business while also making sure that we have the right quality measures in place to make sure that the children in the program are safe. But what we typically find is that the regulations are prohibitive to operating a favorable business. And so a big part of our mission is to work with states work with states, work with cities, work with counties to see what's actually limiting the childcare supply and work on making those changes. But we have a list based off best practices from all the states that we work in.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to see what those rules and regulations are that you guys prefer. The second question I have, and I think you're going to hear it from our opponent testimony, but there's folks in the childcare industry that feel that that Wonder School would be duplicative of services that we already provide in the state of Kansas. Could you respond to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't speak to the systems that are in place today, but what I have found is that we can be a really great partner for organizations that are already doing this kind of work, primarily because of the technology that we have. And so our technology is very, very favorable to a childcare provider. It helps them. So there were some questions around the costs and what does Wonder School do? So Wonder School is very similar. I don't know how people are going to respond to this, but very similar to Airbnb, very similar to Uber in terms of the technology that we've built. The board member of we have board members from Airbnb on our board, and the way we've built it is that it's a way for it's a very user friendly way for a consumer, in this case a parent, to go in and find childcare and go through the tour experience, the event experience, see the prices that they need, and then eventually pay. And then on the provider side, it's a almost like a business in a box, and it allows them to manage their whole business all in one place using software. And what the idea is that Wonder School helps you become a better business person without having to go get your MBA, for example. It hides all of that from you so that you're able to have a strong handbook that's in place. Make sure you have the right prices to stay in business. Make sure that there's enough parents coming to you. And we're essentially operating a marketplace to make sure that that there's enough supply and demand on an ongoing basis. That's very different than what we see in any state. Most of the time when we're going to states, we see that there's a lot of coaching available, which is great. And so what we try to do is partner with organizations that are doing that coaching because there's a lot of local knowledge that's in that. And so we found that to be really valuable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other Representative Poskin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question and a follow-up. I'm a little confused by the earlier conversation that states that home providers can only operate for 20 hours. So is that correct? And is it 20 hours per week and they have to be shut down? I'm confused.
That I'm not familiar with that regulation here.
Home-based daycares currently, if you're watching someone else's kid that you're not related to, you have a limit of 20 hours per week total.
I am not familiar with that, so I will follow up on that later. Is Wonder School a registered resource and referral agency in the state of Kansas?
We are not a resource and referral agency.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Wonder School nonprofit or for-profit?
It's a for-profit business.
Representative Pros.
A couple of things. One would be for maybe the researcher advisors. I would be interested in getting information from about the regulations on in-home daycares to maybe get some clarification on the number of hours. My experience is a little different than that I've had. We've been able to take some children to in-home daycare centers for longer than 20 hours. So I'd like to get some solid information just to make sure we're all operating from that place. You mentioned that you have a list of best practices on regulations. I'd be curious to see that. I don't see that in your testimony, but I'd be curious to see that.
Absolutely. I'd love to share that.
I'm also curious if outside of regulations, you've identified any other barriers that prevent people from standing up an in-home daycare center.
I don't know if you would call these regulations, but
well, I'm not interested in regulations. I'm interested in things kind of more environmental, I guess, or more economic things that keep people out of standing up a daycare center.
Oh, it's usually it's an awareness campaign. So it's primarily there's a lot of misconceptions about the cost to get a program up and running, the cost of insurance, the amount of work that it takes to actually run a program, how much you can earn when you're running a program. And so one of the things we do is we have a sales team that spends a lot of time handling any of those objections and helping folks understand how much they could earn. So whenever we start working with a child care provider, we put together a P&L for them, for their region, for their market, to help them understand how much they could earn, and then show them that, there's a great job on the other end of getting the program up and running. And then we also help them. Another thing a lot of childcare providers don't understand is they could eventually grow to a center if they'd like to. So we help them understand what a P&L of the center looks like if they want to get there. And we use the family-based program as almost like a training ground to learn all of the ins and outs of running a childcare business. So I'd say that's the biggest. It's just awareness is really the thing that really needs to be solved to help more people get into the sector.
And then the question I had earlier, I'll ask you: how do you make your money when the state money runs out and you've got this network of people that you're helping them manage their daycare centers? What's your business model? How do you make your money?
So we have multiple ways of partnering with a childcare program. So when we started the business, we called it our consumer business. So we just went directly to childcare providers, helped them get up and running, and we would charge a percentage of their tuition to be able to operate on the Wonder School platform. And then we realized that we could access a lot more providers because states were interested in making it free for childcare providers to get up and running, which has led to the model that we have today, where we'll partner with a state. The other thing that we've learned is that agencies are lacking real-time data on childcare programs. So there's a lack of understanding of where there's openings, on why childcare providers aren't doing well, et cetera. And so we develop these dashboards that states are able to use to get direct visibility into their supply to help make policy decisions or business decisions. And so going forward, the way it works is the childcare provider, after those 2 years, can move to paying us, whether it's a percentage of their tuition or a flat rate on the number of students that are enrolled. We typically start to think about that a year into the model to figure out what's the ideal model for the market that we're in. But we also find that states oftentimes want that data because it's so valuable, and so we'll work on partnerships to get access to that data on a recurring basis to be able to serve those providers. We've also found that some states, for example, in Nevada, they've wanted to continue paying for the childcare providers. So not the $23,000 amount, but a fraction of that on an ongoing basis to continue to support the childcare providers with business coaching and the technology. So that's a long way of saying that they're options, and we like to work with you all to make the right decision for the providers in your community.
Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next conferee. Thank you very much. I'm not showing any more proponents, and I do have an opponent, Tanya Cohen. Child care aware. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you for having me. My name is Tanya Kane. I'm the interim executive director for Child Care Aware of Kansas. I want to thank you guys for having me today, and I'm here to tell you about our Child Care Aware of Kansas services and why I'm proposed to this bill. Child Care Aware of Kansas has been doing services across the state for over 30 years and doing services just like what you've heard. Our network is in front lines every day, working to connect families to high-quality childcare and providers to enhance their business, and then collaborating with communities to build childcare capacity. You'll see as I outline this that there are a lot of duplicate services that they're talking about. So we work every day. We have a resource center that helps families locate childcare by either a phone call or online. We do that by by calling childcare providers, or they can log online and update their profile. What I really want to talk today is about all of our services with childcare providers. These are, I want to make sure to point out, and you'll see them in my written testimony, are not just services that Child Care Aware of Kansas provides, but also another early childhood partner that we have in the state is Kansas Child Care Training Opportunity that is with K-State University, or also if you've known them, they're called ks.gov, and I'll let you know which ones they offer. So we have the child care health and safety consultants. They work with child care providers to do health and safety, but they also do startup and recruitment with child care providers. These, we have them positioned all across the state, going out and doing startup and helping providers who want to become new and getting them started up in the field, working alongside them and getting them going. Just since 2022, they've opened up more than 14,000 slots across the state, and 86% of those are still open today. We also have our program administrative support. These individuals do just the same, work alongside providers to help them with business practices. Those and our links to quality also help childcare providers and their business practices, budgeting, cash flow, staffing, marketing. This isn't done through technology. This is done side by side with the providers. They've worked with over 600 programs just this year. Casito has an infant toddler specialist network. They work along child care providers that want to and work with them on their infants and toddlers. They do technical assistance, trainings, and help providers with infant and toddlers. They also have the workforce development. This is online, face-to-face training and helping providers get accredited. We have also got a shared service network. This is 8 network hubs across the state, and I did put a map in your stuff that they are tailored just to the childcare providers in their area. Within this network hub, the shared service hub, we contract with 2 shared childcare management softwares, Playground and Brightwheel, that offer similar services like Wonder School that do calendar scheduling, manage billing, reporting, enrollment, and much more for the childcare providers. We offer that to them, childcare providers, to sign up for a 14-month subscription. We have over 800 providers across the state already signed up, and more signing up every day. The benefit to that is we also have what we call regional community consultants across the state that go out, sit beside childcare providers and help them get those platforms set up on their computers, answer questions, and work alongside them. We also have a pilot project that is out in some of our areas, not across the statewide, but this is it's called Baby Steps, and it's a financial incentive to family childcare providers to serve infants. We also work and partner with all communities across the state when they want to build childcare capacity. This is done side by side with communities because it's not just working with the individual, it's also working at the community level because they know what they need in their community and they're wanting to invest in their own communities. We also on our website, and it's hyperlinked in my written testimony, a point in time where you can get immediate information about childcare down to the county. That pulls straight out of our database, so it's always up to date and current. We have lots of information on our website about childcare. We talk to providers every day and to get their updated information. We are funded by in a variety of ways. We have private foundation. We have DCF, KDHE, that's all federally funded that we have to do we have to write grants for. They put out an RFP, we respond to it, and that's how we get that funding. I understand what Wonder School is looking at doing, but I hate to see money duplicated in the state when childcare is such an important issue and we need the funding that we can get for it to go far and wide. So for this reason, I am opposed to HB 2664. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, how many home-based daycare centers do you work with?
We work with anybody across the state. So at all levels, we've worked with probably about 98% of them. I can't say we work with 100% of them because not everybody wants to work with us. We do send out a newsletter to all of them. 99% of them every week.
Home-based daycare centers?
Home-based and center. Yes, we work with all licensed childcare programs, which I might also mention you had the question about the 20 hours. So that is for childcare programs that are not licensed. It's 20 hours per child. So it gets really confusing, and as we tell you, your best bet is to talk to a licensed specialist. But if you have one kid that's there 10 hours and another that's 10, that's where you meet your 20 hours. But regular childcare programs that are there and licensed can be open and watch children for as many hours as they need to. It's just when they're not licensed or it's not their own relative children.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I just have a question. Did Wonder School or anyone with them ever approach any of you all for a sit down or a meeting or a discussion?
Not with us, not at Child Care of Kansas, no.
Can you tell me what your line item is currently? How much money do you get from the state each year?
Sure. So it's, actually had to have them. Hold on, I wrote it down. It's a little bit different now. For COVID, it was obviously a lot more. We get about 4.9 is what we have right now. That is not that we didn't pass through in 2023, but some of that, I mean, it was COVID dollars. I actually thought I wrote that down. I may have to get back to you on that one. I didn't write it down. Our budget is going down as obviously COVID dollars have now disposed.
Okay, your website shows that you facilitated $135 million or $134 million in grants in 2022. Did that just, how many grants have you facilitated this year?
In 2024?
Well, this fiscal
Or
year, 2023. Yeah.
So we did, well, I do have that. We did about 80. Oh, I do have that number. In grants this year, we did, I might have to get that to you. I don't know that I have that written down.
Well, you can take a guess.
How many actual grants or dollars?
Dollars.
I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't even want to guess.
Would you say more than 50 million?
Yes.
Would you say 100 million?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so 100 million this year and 133 million last year. And what did the state of Kansas get for that?
Slots open, or that, well, those would have been sustainability dollars. So they got providers staying open. It doesn't do us any good to open, you know, we are childcare health consultants open 14,000 slots. It doesn't do any good to open 14,000 slots if we lose just as many providers.
One could also make the argument that it's difficult to compete with somebody that's getting money from the government. It's hard to open a new center when another center is getting sustainability grants.
Those new people were also have been qualified if they were actual licensed. They just have to be a licensed childcare provider.
$230 million is a lot of money, 2 years for daycare. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of want to follow up on some of those questions. And I think the information that you'll provide with the committee on the funding for the last 2 years, if you could also include the ratios of those grants given to in-home childcare providers and facilities, just to see, you know, when it comes to grants, who's benefiting from that, and, you know, how can we be more helpful?
Versus childcare centers, just so I understand. Okay.
Representative Dodson and then Blue.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to follow up with research on Representative Blue's request. I'd like to see, in addition, some short description on how the money was used. That is, whether it's training, resources, facilities, etc. I mean, every city in Kansas wants to fix childcare. And that's one of the primary things that we worry about when we're thinking about how to build the economy, how to put people back in the workforce. And we've got, it seems to me, some great briefings here today, but you know, it seems so disparate. And we were hopeful that the governor's plan, the task force, was going to wrap some of this together so we'd know who is the primary driver of childcare in Kansas, who's going to change the ratio of childcare provider to those that are provided for, et cetera, across the board. So I think Representative Blue's questions, with the addition of what I've asked, will give us some insight about who's doing what to whom here.
Okay, one final question because we're 15 minutes overdue right now. So Representative Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you get to us how much money you guys have had and that you've gotten from the state, could you put on there how many slots you've opened up from all of that? Mm-hmm. That was the first thing. And the last thing I just want to ask is, based on on line 31 on the first page where it says provide similar services in 3 states, would that disqualify you from the RFP, and why?
Yes, that disqualify us because we are just Kansas based.
Okay, thanks so much for being here, and thanks for asking or answering the tough questions. And we look forward to getting that information from you. Committee, we are not going to work this bill tomorrow, but it was a good discussion to have because all the daycare bills are coming through this committee. Good luck, Charles. All right, we're adjourned. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.